everything in the world is qualitative, but it's quantitative if you're good enough. Your worldview can shape how you interact with the system, but also your whole experience. We'd look at building an AI-based solution, which was a conversational app, and without language or culture being a barrier. I think the media and marketing industry is the key to unlock that. I know it's a big call.
Welcome to Rules Don't Apply, where we're speaking with pioneers, provocateurs, and purveyors of non-conventional wisdom. Recorded alongside a live audience at South by Southwest Sydney, this series seeks to redefine the art of the possible. Because for those looking to navigate what's next, the rules of today may just no longer apply. Festival goers of South by Southwest, if you are roaming the gallery or in the Platinum Lounge, come on over. We've got an amazing chat that's about to get underway at the Growth Distillery. Because I am very, very privileged to be joined by Reg Raghavan. For those playing at home, Reg is the founder and chief executive of CulturalPulse, a multicultural and international CX and insights agency. These guys are doing some truly pioneering work at the intersection of culture, technology and anthropology, one in particular that's quite close to my heart that we'll get into. Reg has held numerous roles across some really interesting tech companies, both domestically and in Silicon Valley, including HP, Fujifilm, Sun Microsystems. You've also worked pretty extensively with the federal government as a senior strategist and consultant, so I feel very, very honoured to be sitting next to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, man.
I want to start with your journey, and then we're going to really widen the aperture to CALD communities across the country. But you spent your formative years in the corporate sector, and then you made this sort of pretty immediate transition out of that into the entrepreneurial space. And you've got a really interesting story there I'd love for you to share.
Yeah, sure. Well, born in Sydney.
Western Sydney boy?
Western Sydney boy. Nepean Hospital. So my parents came after the White Australia policy when the immigration floodgates opened a little bit for Asian communities. They left India, South India, in 1973. So we were here pretty early. I was born here, went through school, pretty normal schooling experience out in Western Sydney. University, studied tech there. Aspirations to get a job and just to live the normal life. I was really curious about volunteering. I thought this idea of volunteering, and I know it's part of the Aussie DNA as well, is to volunteer, whether it's community sport or whatever it might be. But I was really aligned to that. And so a volunteering opportunity took me out to... before that I went to Silicon Valley, so I lived there for a year. And that kind of...
Rode the dot-com wave.
Yeah, dot-com wave, 2000, boom and bust.
Yep.
And then that kind of gave me a really interesting perspective on entrepreneurship and what was out there in the world. But coming back, was in the big tech sector, and then had this opportunity to go out to a remote Indigenous community where the Pintabee are, like 500 k's west of Alice Springs, which is out in Kintor.
Red Centre, yeah.
Wallangaroo, yeah. And it was a project not dissimilar to this, just kind of shooting a video to promote a not-for-profit project around kidney disease. And one of the elders there talked about, because I asked, they were going to hospital and running away, committing suicide in hospital in Alice Springs after they were on dialysis, and I kind of asked the reason why, and they basically said that their view of health is different to the Western view of health, and I thought that was interesting. So I asked why, and they said, our definition of health is, Ngura, land, Walcha, family, Chukurpa, which is dreaming. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. They said, if we've got these elements, then we feel healthy. And so that's why there was this kind of running away from hospital and committing suicide. And I thought that's so interesting that your worldview can shape how you interact with, the system, but also how you, your whole experience. And that kind of triangulated with my experience growing up. And so all the kind of cards started dropping into place in terms of my parents' experience and also me as a second generation Aussie, how culture plays a different role. And one specific example for me was I remember year 6 going to school camp, and I was asked to set the table, and I had no idea how to set the table at age 12 because we were eating it with our hands at home, and lunch at school was sandwiches and stuff. So it's just little things like that where the penny dropped, and it was like, oh, this culture thing's really interesting, and there's something to it.
Which took you to CulturalPulse. So, give us a quick, bio on what does CulturalPulse do? What's the vision?
Yeah, I mean, our vision is to activate today's Australia. So the whole idea
Australia.
Yeah, the whole of Australia. We're 51% one or more parent born overseas now. That's going to be 56% by next census. We're 30% born overseas. 21% has Asian ancestry. And the great Noel Pearson said we've got three parts to this country, which is our Indigenous roots, the British inheritance and all the systems of government and democracy, and then this multicultural achievement. So the vision's really about making sure multicultural achievement is our strength as a country, and that we can use that globally, and also everybody feels like they've got access to services, and there's value for money in taxpayer dollars. There's a whole bunch of things that can come off that, but really it's about an integrated Australia.
Where are we not getting it right in terms of engaging and representing the whole Australia, as you call it?
Yeah, I think it's changed over time. I think we are picking it up, and it is going to happen. It's just a matter of when we're going to understand this. 5 years ago, I'd say with the industry, probably people didn't believe the numbers. I remember speaking to a guy who was running, he was the head of premium banking at one of the banks, and I said, what's actually going on here? Like, why don't people believe the numbers? And he's like, yeah, we just don't believe the census numbers, because, if you live in the east here in Sydney, for example, you probably don't see what's actually out there very often, and how things have changed so rapidly. So that was 5 years ago. Now I think people are starting to see it. There's a narrative where they're like, yep, this is a large audience and a large group. Probably where we're at now is just understanding that called communities, culturally and linguistically diverse as a label, need to be reached in a different way. And I'd almost go as far as saying it's in the inverted way. You have to reach these communities in a different manner.
Can you go a bit deeper into that? Explain to us what you mean.
Yeah. So if you look at, there's a lot of studies done around cultural dimensions, and there's things like individualism and collectivism. Power distance, authority, and Australia's a pretty egalitarian country. Australia's pretty short-term oriented. Australia's pretty individualist. Most Western societies are pretty individualist in thinking when you look at it that way. A lot of communities are the opposite, and certainly my experience with the Pintabee is that their cultural dimensions were almost diametrically opposite to the Anglo-Celtic, which is why there's so much tension when it comes to how do we run effective programs out in communities. But similarly, all these cultures are on a spread across those cultural dimensions, and it's been well researched globally. Yeah. But when you apply it to the Australian context, what does it mean? So things like, a simple example would be collective societies. They work in groups, in clusters. Community leaders, during COVID when the ads went out, and Scott Morrison was on the ad, and everybody went, oh, this is a crap ad. For a lot of communities where authority is important, they were like, the Prime Minister's spoken. Yeah. So there's all these dimensions and levers you can pull to optimize the effectiveness in terms of, if you're looking at marketing and media.
Pragmatically speaking, if you're a brand or you're a not-for-profit, or you're looking to enable and empower these communities, at a practical level, how do you accommodate the rich nuance? Even within certain countries, you've got thousands of dialects. The north of a country and the south of a country might again be diametrically opposed. There's sort of, the lower and lower down you get, the more and more nuance that you unpack.
Yeah.
How should brands or businesses go about being respectful of that nuance, but also trying to represent the melting pot that is Australia? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think probably one thing to add on the previous point is that in the past as well, a lot of not-for-profits, for example, would deal with it. It was quite a politicised topic, multicultural, and even the word multicultural is a politicized topics. So it was always seen as this group over there, disadvantaged, small and disadvantaged. One of the things we wanted to reset in terms of, the perception is that they're not small, they're large, and they also have high disposable incomes. And if you look at the size,
they're nation builders.
Yeah. So I think this is where understanding those dimensions. So the first thing to acknowledge is that a lot of these communities are different to the Anglo-Celtic worldview in terms of So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is to go, okay, then you're faced with this thing of there's 300 different languages, etc. But when you cluster that together, there's actually a lot of commonality. So you've got individual societies are generally European, Anglo-Celtic European, and then all the other countries are pretty collective, for example. So you can start to cluster groups in terms of behaviour, not to kind of to mark them as this is how they behave, but it's looking at group dynamics and group behaviours.
And shared ideologies.
So, for example, that authority one, it might be someone. There's a lot of countries, a lot of cultures that would respect their elders, including Indigenous communities, where that eldership is a big thing. So during COVID, where we need to get messages out, it was the head of the family as the authority saying, all right, we're going to take the shots, or we're not going to take the shots, whatever it might be. And that was culturally driven, not just linguistic, and based on clustered groups.
What resources do business leaders and brand practitioners have on hand to be able to help navigate what is an increasingly diverse Australia?
I think there's a lot out there in terms of, we've got NAATI accredited translators for language, we've got, there's champions in each business, there's cultural competence, diversity trainers, for example, but I think there's the thing that's missing is the kind of underpinning context and strategy, really, in terms of how you might go about that.
And what do you mean by underpinning context?
Similar to the question you asked earlier, which is around, how do you reach these groups? So, because the immediate thing becomes
the problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah. I've got to reach 300 communities. It's too much, too hard basket. Yeah. So, just I think having the right advice at the right time. I think that, and I always say, brands have an inherent, organisations have an inherent cultural competence. They're already doing stuff at the moment. So if you take a bank now, they're already doing stuff. They've got a migrant banking strategy. They've got, so it's not that they're starting from scratch, but it's what strategic context are they operating in, and how are they plugging that together?
Let's talk about technology as an enabler, because I know that this is a space that you guys are doing some incredible work. How do you see technology accelerating our ability to empower all Australians over the coming 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think Our the tech part of our business has been focused on codifying culture. So I think I was studying anthropology, and I was reading one of the papers, and there was a guy who wrote one of the papers, and he said everything in the world is qualitative, but it's quantitative if you're good enough. So, and this was applied to the world
it's a great adage.
Social science. So, and culture is one of those areas because it can play out in many different ways. But if you can get it at the right level of abstraction, then you're able to codify it. So I think technology can help with that. I think in particular AI, this is where it's a fantastic use case for AI. Particularly once you understand, let's say you're doing creative, you've got your core messages, like to actually to go out and translate that into 200 languages and then get it reviewed by your, communities.
Or even augment it towards those codes of culture. Take a creative and make sure that it resonates with one community versus another.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about midwives. So, you've been speaking here about this, I think, an incredible application for a virtual midwife. Talk us through the work that you're doing there and the application to build better outcomes, particularly for multicultural mothers.
Yeah, sure. I'll start just back again that Australia is one of the most diverse countries in the world.
Yeah, and one of the most successful.
Yeah, successful from a multicultural perspective. Very different in France, very different in the UK, very different in the US for different reasons. And instead of applying our lens of multiculturalism as it applies there. We have the ability to define our own way, particularly being so close to Asia. But if you look at Australia being one of the most diverse countries in the world, New South Wales, for example, then being one of the most diverse states, Sydney being one of the most diverse cities in the world, and then you go into Western Sydney, a place like Southwest Sydney, one of the most diverse regions of the world. 86% are called. So we work with the Southwest Local Area Health District, reach out through a New South Wales government commercialisation program. And they said, we've got this challenge. It was post-COVID, and we said, we've got all these patients coming in, and we had trouble communicating when there's during busy times, and coordinating translators to come in at the right time, and optimizing our administrative resources. So they put this challenge out. There was a New South Wales government program where they asked us to do a feasibility, so we applied for that. We got accepted to do a feasibility study. And basically, what was it about? It was about looking at the antenatal use case, where there's, once somebody's pregnant, they'll see a GP or go for this antenatal interview at the hospital. And we thought that was a perfect use case to test, this translation solution, which is a live voice-to-voice, not dissimilar to Google Translate.
Yep.
But we looked at it a little bit further. So we looked at earlier. We realised that there were booking problems based on different cultures and their worldviews. A lot of women were saying that they didn't understand the system, where potentially there were wait times for 6 hours, so they didn't go up to the person to say, "I'm here." So they were waiting for 6 hours in the waiting area, for example. And then issues even further before that in terms of questions that people might have, and talking to some specialists, they say it's a period of time where there's high anxiety, hormones are running wild as soon as pregnancy is announced. So we thought we'd look at building an AI-based solution, which was a conversational app linked to sources, credible sources of data, information, where people can interrogate that information, talk to a persona that they feel comfortable with, and prepare them really to book that appointment and then have the right conversation, and without language or culture being a barrier.
And what are some of the outcomes that you've seen off the back of that work?
Yeah, we're still in proof of concept, but there's a lot of we're just going for ethics approval, working with two hospitals at the moment, Fairfield and Liverpool Hospital. But there's been a lot of excitement around the idea of it, and a lot of potential as well, and also potential to scale into other areas like aged care, and there's these aged care reforms happening, and any health context in Australia or globally, and could also be outside of that context, even from a corporate perspective. Like the whole customer journey right now is pretty oriented culturally in a particular way.
I think particularly as we come across this age incumbency, and we have the inverse pyramid. I think aged care outcomes are going to start to become a massive opportunity particularly for representing outcomes for Australians. Last one from me. What do you hope Cultural Pulse's legacy is going to be as it pertains to technology and CALD outcomes?
Look, I think as a nation we've got a really big opportunity. If we look at the geopolitical context, Australia's position in Asia is, the next 50 years will be the dominant force just based on all the economics that we see. I think we've got an amazing opportunity to showcase how a successful multicultural society operates, and how we can influence in the region. And I know that's kind of big and lofty, but I think without, whether it's sport or whether it's government or, whatever services we have, I think all Australians understanding what today's Australia looks like, because in many ways we're still operating as if Australia was back in the 90s or back in the 80s in terms of audience understanding. Once we all understand that context, and we leverage our multiculturalness, our multicultural achievement for our benefit, then I think there'll be amazing social and economic outcomes. But more pragmatically, I think the media and marketing industry is the key to unlock that. I know it's a big call.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I just think so much money it's about our story. What's our story, as a nation? And people are still a bit like, oh, what does it mean to be Australian? What are Australian values? And that's been, mixed over time. Even our biggest day, Australia Day has some division.
Yeah, some tension playing out.
There's all this topic about division, and a lot of Aussies are divided at the moment, depending on different topics. So I think being more integrated in that, and how can the marketing and media industry help? Well, we're storytellers, and once we understand who Australia is, we can tell the story of Australia in every ad, in every communications, and resonate with everyone for that benefit. So I think the vision's really around equipping our storytellers with the right data and insights to then go about doing that. And because we've got some of the best storytellers in the world, we've got amazing industries like sport and international education. We're leading the world in many ways, and I just think if we can harness that by understanding ourselves first and being able to tell that story, then it'll have massive social and economic impact.
I think that is a wonderfully noble cause, both on the small scale, but I think, don't discount that ambition. We are an exceptionally successful, relatively speaking, multicultural country, and I think if we can take those learnings and adopt those regionally, I think that there is huge benefit, not just domestically but abroad.
And I want to say that culture is not just about are you brown or
No.
white. It's actually all Aussies. If you've travelled overseas, if you've lived overseas, you've got we've got this mind, because Aussies love travelling as well. People are dating people from different cultures here. There's a broader mindset. So, ideally, I'd love to see Diwali at Bondi Beach, or Filipino fiesta at Sydney Opera House, or and all Australians can enjoy that. And we've got bits and pieces of that around. But I think Aussies love a holiday as well. So let's celebrate all the world's holidays.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Reg. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, man.